There will be another game after Michigan TCU on Saturday night. Of course, that's Georgia, Ohio State from Atlanta in the Peach Bowl, the other CFP semifinal. Want to know from you guys, who are you rooting for? I mean, looking back at our live show last week on Wednesday, National Signing Day, it was like 99% Georgia. Want to see if that general consensus among Michigan fans has changed at all 6-7 days later from then. All right, so go ahead and type G if you're rooting for the Georgia Bulldogs, the number one team in college football, or the fourth-ranked Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm not going to sugarcoat this at all. I don't even want Ohio State to have a chance to win a national title, get revenge against Michigan, even though I think Michigan would have a better chance of winning it all if they face Ohio State. It is what it is there. So I am putting a G. Let me know down in the comments. We are going to talk Donovan Edwards' injury, some thoughts on Jim Harbaugh, Michigan TCU preview, and a 5-star recruit who may be committing sooner than later. It's all coming up on the Michigan Football Report from Chat Sports right now. Make sure you join us because the game's on Saturday. I want to make sure that we're getting you guys all the news and rumors later throughout the week. We're going to go live tomorrow, Wednesday, 5 o'clock Eastern. Should be live for about 90 minutes or so. We'll do our full college football playoff preview, give you some inside nuggets on Michigan's game plan against TCU from an offensive and defensive perspective. So make sure you join us. And you guys, if you join the crew, you could get on the hard hat, give some shout outs here. John Blaze, Cool Moti, Wolverine Alaska, Blue Wolverine, Shane Johnson, Jeremy Clore, Mr. Bojangles, and many, many others. I've had a huge just growth in the channel, too much growth of the channel on our live shows over the past 6 weeks. So make sure to join us tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern. Folks, you're watching the Michigan Football Report by Chat Sports. As we have talked about over the last couple weeks, Donovan Edwards' injury seems to be the only thing most Michigan fans, hell, college football fans regarding this game want to know more about. Let's take a look at what we know. Now, Michigan arrived Monday night, last night, in Phoenix at the Phoenix Harbor Airport on a chartered flight. They weren't flying commercial or anything like that. But Donovan Edwards conspicuously had his right hand just tucked into the pocket of his Michigan warm-ups. That picture is via the J Slate on Instagram. So thank you, giving her some attribution on that photo. Took it from Michigan's exiting of the plane yesterday. Okay, cool. So Donovan Edwards arriving in Phoenix, hiding his hand, but Michigan did practice today. Take a look at this one. If you remember from Purdue, if you remember from Ohio State game, Donovan Edwards had a big old white cast on that right hand. I told you last week he had surgery. We were fairly confident, have now confirmed, had surgery following the Purdue game, Big Ten championship game, and is now rocking a smaller cast, which I actually think the way things are progressing, what it seems like is that Edwards will not have any cast on that hand when Michigan plays in the national championship game, which would be, the 27th, for about 13 days or so from now. Yeah, exactly 13 days since it's on Monday, January 9th. So Donovan Edwards practicing in the house in Phoenix. Of course, no expectation that he wouldn't be, but with a smaller black cast on, not that big old clunky white cast he had on the last two games. All right, on today's show, we're going to talk some Michigan TCU. Both teams did press conferences over the last 24 hours, let you know some things that were said. Also, more on Donovan Edwards, as we've talked about. What do I just think about what the expectation, what the blueprint in the past might be for him over these next two games, and looking back to the past two games, and then a 5-star recruit, Michigan's top target, deciding soon, a little sooner than later. We'll tell you about all of that coming up on the show. But I did want to start off with this. Michigan uniforms. We've been following this guy, Swanky Wolverine. Great photo. Great to follow on Twitter, at Swanky Wolverine. The best edits in the game for Michigan football. He's been like 6 for 6 in big games this year in predicting the uniforms days before Michigan officially announced them. So I am going to put the faith of his track record behind it, that this is the tweet that he put out a couple days ago. I think it was on Sunday night, that Michigan will be rocking the traditionals, but with all blue accents, blue sleeves, blue socks, blue gloves, etc. So keep an eye out for an official announcement. I'm sure Michigan will tweet something out, put it on Instagram on Friday afternoon, the day before the game, like they have all season. Folks, let's talk a little about Michigan TCU. My take in general is Jim Harbaugh, over the last couple years, maybe let's go back to 2018, he overcame, can't beat a ranked team on the road, right? He beat Michigan State on the road. Then last year, he broke the Ohio State curse. He broke some of the other curses, went on the road, beat Penn State, went into Nebraska and Wisconsin back-to-back weeks, not in that order. Weren't ranked teams, but went into hostile environments, got the win. But the thing that's still hanging over Jim Harbaugh's head really is his performance in the postseason. He needs to overcome the brutal performances that Michigan has had, folks, under Jim Harbaugh. Michigan is now 1-5 in bowl games, counting the college football playoff still is a bowl game, postseason game we can call it, but it includes 5 straight losses, right? They absolutely blew Florida out, a good Florida team, an SEC East champion in 2015 on January 1st. But since then, they've lost to a bad Florida team or a mediocre Florida team. They gave up a 3-score, 2-score lead against South Carolina. Now, there were a couple games, Georgia, Alabama, where they weren't favored, but Michigan has lost several games, 3 out of the 5 losses, I would say, where they absolutely should have won those games. And Florida State as well after the 2016 season. I think Jim Harbaugh is up against a bad reputation of not getting his teams ready to play for these postseason games after a 2, 3, 4-week, obviously now, layoff. And I think it's something he's got to overcome through by beating TCU coming up on Saturday afternoon. Folks, TCU and Michigan talked to the press yesterday, and the general consensus amongst their players and coaches, and they were baited by the media. You can go read the whole transcript out there somewhere on the internet, but the medias were trying to base them. It's like, hey, this one guy said Michigan reminded him of Kansas State, right? A Kansas State team that just beat TCU, a Kansas State team that probably should have beat them in their regular season matchup as well. But what was Kansas State? Went down to like third-string quarterback by the end of the game. So, two potential losses for TCU against that type of play. Kansas State, similar to Michigan. So, TCU players, coaches, they're saying Michigan reminds them of Kansas State. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be a negative thing or a positive thing, or it's just recognizing the style of play of the two teams. But I did find it interesting because a week ago they were saying, oh, Michigan reminds them of Texas. I've watched several Texas games this year, a bunch of Texas film. I don't necessarily see it. Maybe from an offensive perspective, sometimes passing, but from a defensive perspective, running game, I don't necessarily see the comparisons between Michigan and Texas. I want to know from you guys, though, as we dive into some Donovan Edwards talk here, who will be the Fiesta Bowl MVP of the game? Right? I'm going to assume here that Michigan's going to win. Putting out good vibes there into the world. But let me know who will be the Fiesta Bowl MVP. I think there's quite a few candidates, right? It could be a Mike Morris making a big impact on the defensive side, Mike Sainristil, Donovan Edwards, hell, maybe Cornelius Johnson blows up like he did against Ohio State. J.J. McCarthy, clearly a winning quarterback, probably has the best odds. So let me know down in the comments. My pick for MVP, it's going to be Donovan Edwards. I think that the same playbook that Michigan ran against Ohio State, or maybe just the same way the game played out, will likely play out against TCU. I could see this game being close. I could say Michigan even being down at halftime like they were against Penn State, like they were against Ohio State. But I do think Michigan's strength in the trenches will allow them to pull away in the second half. Donovan Edwards will be a big part of that. Maybe we'll get a couple of those the Don calls late in the game, although Gunch Johnson is not on the call. That Donovan Edwards breaks free, has 150 yards or something in the second half, and ultimately ends up with 200 yards on 22 carries or something like that. Michigan is still a 7.5-point favorite. The over/under is 58.5. It really hasn't moved in about 7, 8, 10 days or so on this game. So it seems to be that's where the number is coming in. On live show tomorrow, I'll tell you where the public and the pro bettors are putting their money on this game. But where you can put your money is at our sportsbook partner, BetUS, the 125% promo code. We're keeping it alive for the college football playoffs. So go to chatsports.com/GoBlue. You put in that promo code GoBlue when you sign up and deposit. 125% deposit bonus. Quick math, $100 first deposit, you get an extra $125, $200, extra $250, and up from there, you can put up into $500 to get an extra $625. Chatsports.com/GoBlue. Type that into your browser. Use the promo code, no spaces, 125% deposit bonus. Put some money on Michigan, right? Maybe you win cash when they win this game, of course, by 7.5 points. Thought a lot about what Donovan Edwards needs to do to lead Michigan from a running back perspective to a national championship, given that Michigan's a running team under Jim Harbaugh. And I don't think anything this season is going to change that. Maybe with the maturation of J.J. McCarthy next year, we could see a little bit more. But I think back to the 2014 season, the last time a Big Ten team won a national championship. That was Ohio State. What was similar about that Ohio State team to this Michigan team, and maybe different than the current Ohio State regime, is that they had a dominant running game that was able to get the job done and absolutely bludgeon a really good Alabama team that season and get the win. It really kind of familiar, was very familiar to the Ohio State game this year. Ezekiel Elliott just kept pounding Alabama, then just took off for 75, 80-yard runs towards the end of the game. Could Zeke performance in 2014, could his performance be the kind of the proving ground for what Donovan Edwards is going to do? Let's take a look back to Ezekiel Elliott. 2014 led Ohio State as a sophomore, second-year player to a national championship, right? 17 carries for 121 and 2 touchdowns against Michigan. in Columbus. Okay, nothing huge, but then he put on a 3-game performance unlike we've ever seen in this college football playoff era from a running back. 220 yards, 2 touchdowns against Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. Then against Alabama, number 1 ranked Alabama team. 230 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then on 20 carries, by the way, 36 carries for 246 and 4 touchdowns against Oregon in the national championship game. An Oregon team that was favored against Ohio State, and 93 carries, 800 yards, and 10 touchdowns over the 4-game stretch, folks. He had like 1,050 yards going into the Michigan game, ended up with nearly 2,000 yards, like 1,870 yards for the season. Donovan Edwards, he's on pace, maybe not from a touchdown perspective. Average per carry, of course. Zeke had 90-plus carries. Donovan Edwards right on that pace right there. 47, you double that. That's 94 carries there. You double his yards, 800. Those are in line, right? Edwards has had 200 yards per game over these last 2 games. He doesn't necessarily have to have 220, 246 in the CFP like Zeke did, but 2 touchdowns per game, 150 to 200 in these next 2 games, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 touchdowns, either against TCU or the Ohio State-Georgia winner. I think that's what Michigan's going to need to be able to win this national championship. I'm kind of basing it on what they need to do to beat Georgia. You need a legendary all-time performance. I think that's what Donovan Edwards are putting in front of him. If he can match Zeke Elliott's 4-game stretch, which he's on pace to do right now from the end of the 2014, Michigan might be looking at themselves being the first national champion since that 2014 team from Ohio State of the Big Ten. But I'll ask you guys this question. How many rushing yards will Donovan Edwards have against TCU? I've probably made 2 or 3 predictions. At this point, I'm going to say 145, but I actually might be disappointed if that's only the number, considering I think he's going to get pretty much every single carry that Michigan has on the ground in this game, unless maybe J.J. McCarthy runs a few times, although you cannot let McCarthy get hurt. But let me know down in the comments how many rushing yards will he have on Saturday against TCU. Can Donovan Edwards be Michigan's Ezekiel Elliott? Ezekiel Elliott ended up being a top 5 pick in the NFL draft after another season. 2015 team against Ohio State didn't get it done, but not necessarily because of him. They lost against Michigan State when they only gave him like a dozen carries or something like that. But this is the expectation that I think that Donovan Edwards and Michigan should have, is make sure that he is the MVP of the game, make sure he's the MVP of the national championship game. Open those holes. Come up with a scheme that works against TCU, obviously, but then Michigan's going to have 9 days to hunker down, focus. Can they exploit something against Georgia in the running game that clearly they had no chance of doing last year with Donovan Edwards, with Blake Corum, with Hassan Haskins? Michigan had no chance of moving the ball really until late when Georgia was already up by 3 scores or more. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Donovan Edwards, a little bit of a cast on, but can he match Zeke Elliott from 2014? All right, folks, we are going to switch gears now and talk a little recruiting. Nyckoles Harbaugh, 5-star athlete. His high school football coach called him the LeBron James of high school football, more from a physically dominant perspective. I saw a South Carolina booster tweet out they were going to give him some sort of Jeep SUV. I call him South Carolina broke boys, only offering Nyckoles Harbaugh, superstar athlete, only a Jeep to come to South Carolina. Nyckoles, if you're listening, which you clearly are, the Nyckoles Harbaugh and James Yoder show on YouTube, $10,000 a month. The offer is on the table, permitted that you're living in Ann Arbor during that next season. Hit me up at James Yoder on Twitter. But he talked about what his plans are. We didn't think he was going to commit until late January, early February. Here is what he told the media today. He says, we're close to a decision. That decision, and he says, may come, that's in for real soon in terms of me and my family. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to commit soon or announce soon, but his family's going to decide fairly soon. So that was the first quote there. We're coming to a decision really close. Me and my family were close to making that decision. And then they asked him about Michigan. They talked about different schools, Miami, LSU, others, South Carolina. Michigan specifically, a lot of my family members are up there in Detroit, Ann Arbor. That's one of my mom's favorite schools, and that's also Coach Carroll, his high school coach's school. So they're just really in a good position. Plus, I feel like I had the best time up in Michigan. It just feels really good to be up there all the time. I'm optimistic here. Michigan has missed out on these kind of guys several times, dozens of times over the years. But when it comes down to it, this reminds me in some ways maybe like a Donovan Edwards commitment coming down the stretch in 2020, 2021 class, many people thought Donovan Edwards might go to Ohio State or elsewhere. They had taken on Travion Henderson. Okay, so maybe he goes down to Georgia, elsewhere. But I think Michigan's going to end up landing Nyckoles Harbaugh. He's reportedly down to Maryland, Michigan, and South Carolina. Going to take an official visit in the next coming weeks, either to Miami or LSU. Can NIL come into play? Can somebody drop more than a Jeep payment for 36-month lease on him? Maybe that could sway him. But if it comes down to just football and track, which he wants to play, and he'll either be a defensive end or wide receiver tight end combo freak in college, I think Michigan, stacks up well against Maryland and South Carolina. Folks, that is today's show. If you missed it at the top, if you forgot already after the last 15 minutes or so, tomorrow 5 p.m. Eastern, join us, youtube.com/Michigan TV. Make sure you subscribe. Send the link to a friend or two. It's down in the comments and description of today's video. Tell them to join us tomorrow, and if they like what they see, give us a subscription. We will see you tomorrow. Until then, go Blue.